Story 1. Scammed by the residential complex management company. The management company for our residential complex offered to do their work for us. Well, we did, but not as they expected. I'm 27. I live in a residential complex that was recently, in June 2023, purchased by a new management company. My best friends, Caleb, 29, also live in the same complex, but on the other side. The first thing the new management company did was switch us to a new online system for residents and rent payments. I don't know what exactly went wrong, but the launch of the new system took over a month, and it was a nightmare, because all issues with the management company are resolved exclusively through this system. On August 2nd, I logged into the new system to pay rent. As usual, I checked the itemized utility bill. Typically, it includes water, garbage, sewer, general operating costs, and internet cable. Utilities are billed based on actual consumption. I've been living in my current apartment since September 2022, and before that, I lived in 2 other apartments in this same complex for about 3 years in total. Long story short, I know very well what my utilities bill in this complex looks like, especially the utility bill. To my surprise and confusion, the utility bill was $91. It's usually around $30-40. I understand that tariff increases happen, but they usually happen at the beginning of the year and are never so abrupt. I immediately emailed the management company, politely asking what the hell was going on. The assistant manager told me that the water utility had raised the rates and that the complex had nothing to do with it, and there was nothing they could do. The answer was something like, "We had nothing to do with it." I found this odd, so I called my friends living on the other side of the complex to see if they were having the same problem. They said their utility bill was also double the usual amount, $120. They also contacted the office and received the same response. KOL asked if the management company would investigate, as it seemed suspicious. A mid-year increase, and by such a large amount, to which the office told him he could handle it himself, as it wasn't their job, even though it was. And that's when Cole's malicious subordination mode kicked in. KOL is a very meticulous person. He's a data analyst. Asking questions and finding answers is his job. And believe me, he does it very well. KOL contacted the water utility several times by phone, email, and chat, and each time received the same answer: "We never increase water rates in the middle of the year, and certainly not by that much. Your complex is lying to you. Something's not right. Deal with them." He gathered all this information and drafted a letter to the management company, including quoting the minutes of a water utility meeting where plans for increasing water rates for the coming years were discussed. Cole also included other issues we've had with the complex: access to the gym and pool, and constantly broken gates. In my correspondence with the water company, an employee named Lisa said, "Our rates went up in January of this year. We never raised them mid-year. Given all of the above information, I hope my concerns about the recent increase in our water rates are understandable." We had many other questions for the management company. I was almost hit by a car twice on the complex grounds because cars were driving through the exit gate. I believe this is because there are no barriers preventing drivers from driving through the exit gate. An inspection revealed that spike strips had previously been installed, but they are no longer there, which contradicts signs on the grounds stating otherwise. My husband went to the management company office regarding access to the gym. I don't know who Phoebe spoke to, but she was told that she needed to create an account to gain access to the gym through the wireless lock. She was also told that an email with access would arrive within a day, but about 3 weeks had already passed. Cole sent the email, blind copied me, and we waited and waited. Finally, Cole went to the management company's office again, and one of the employees told him he could call our utility company, Ubervest, to clarify the situation. So he called, and Ubervest confirmed that they no longer had a contract with our complex as of mid-July. The mystery was getting more and more interesting. Cole contacted the office again and learned that we now had a utility contract with Conservice. We called them. Conservice told us that they only started working with our complex on August 1st, 2023, and didn't have any historical data on our bills. So we called Ubervest again to try to get the old data. And that's where things started getting really murky. Bivest forwarded our request regarding our complex's contract to the financial manager, and she had some very interesting information. She told Cole and me that she'd noticed an increase in the plant bill and reported it to the manager at the management company, naming her by name, saying something was wrong, and that, by law, it needed to be addressed. She never received a response. Soon after, their contract was terminated. At that moment, we both felt like real detectives. We began to figure out how the plant bill was calculated and distributed among all the residents of the complex. And the deeper we delved, the less consistent it was with what we were being told at the management company office. The inconsistencies were simply shocking. The office staff seemed to be getting really annoyed by our persistence and told us that if we were unhappy with anything, we should contact the head office. But that's exactly what we did. Cole contacted head office and forwarded them all the information he'd gathered, including the responses he'd received the last time he'd visited our management company's office to seek an explanation. Sorry, I'm new and still figuring things out myself. When I asked about the plant bill, we no longer have access to that data. When I raised the issue of financial reconciliations showing I'd overpaid the complex by over $2.0, did you ever think your car being stolen was a test from God when mine was stolen right off the complex grounds? We're working on improving security, but head office. Every time I've asked about gates being climbed over or a resident being shot on the premises, head office has responded within 24 hours and said they'll look into it. Then the regional manager personally called Cole after she'd had a chance to review everything. And I mean everything. Unfortunately, I wasn't present for the call, so I don't know exactly how it went, but Cole called me back immediately afterward and recounted the entire story. The regional manager began the conversation with a sincere apology and announced that the entire staff at our management company's office had been terminated effective immediately. She apologized for the manager's daring to suggest that Phoebe's car theft was a test from God, calling it completely unacceptable. She also assured Cole that a date had already been set for the gate repair and the reinstallation of the spikes at the exit within the week. All other issues would be personally investigated by her, including the water bills for all residents in the complex. She also said she had no idea that anyone had been shot or that Phoebe's car had been stolen. Although all of this should have been reported immediately to the main office, our manager failed to do so. In a few weeks, our complex will be managed by a completely new staff assigned directly from the main office. And now, on to the next story. Story 2. Scammed by a rude car dealer. The dealer told me I'd be wasting my time going to the competition, but they gave me top-notch service. It was 8 years ago when I was buying my first new car. Not just new to me, but truly new. I spent a lot of time researching the available options, both from other manufacturers and trim levels of the car I liked best, so I knew exactly what I wanted when I walked into the dealership. Back in 2014, car dealership websites hadn't yet reached the near-deceptive gimmicks of today. So if a dealership's website said they had a specific car at a specific price, they almost certainly did. There were several available options in the area, and one of them was at my current dealership. It wasn't a small dealership, but one of the largest in Northern Virginia. I had a pretty good experience with their service department, and I decided to give the sales team a chance to shine. That was my first mistake. I arrived there on Wednesday after work. It was early June. The temperature was around 35°C, so I was dressed comfortably but still quite neatly. I was wearing a white blouse and beige shorts. When I entered the sales department, I saw that all the salespeople were sitting in the conference room, laughing and joking. In fact, one employee was having his tie cut. I later learned that this was their ritual. After the first sale, I waited for a minute or two. The conference room was glass, so they couldn't help but notice me since I'm not a small guy at almost 2 meters tall, but no one came out. Then I went up to the reception desk and said, "Hello, I'm interested in such and such a car model. Your website says it's in stock, and I'd like to see it." The girl, without even looking up from her phone, answered, "Okay." I stood there for another 20 seconds and politely asked, "Can someone show me this car?" Then she finally looked up from her phone, looked me down, grinned, and said she'd call someone. I decided to give them another chance, hoping things would improve. That was my second mistake. The girl returned with what appeared to be the youngest, most inexperienced salesperson she could find. Apparently, I didn't deserve the attention of more experienced employees. I explained that I was interested in a car that, according to their website, was in stock and showed a printout with the serial number, price, and all the details. He spent quite a while searching for the car on the lot, but after a short test drive, I realized it was exactly what I wanted, and we began the purchasing process. I had a car for a trade-in, which was mostly serviced at this dealership. I already had a written offer from a competitor, Karma, so I knew roughly how much I should get for it. The salesperson quoted a figure slightly more than half of the competitor's figure. When I pointed out that I could get a few thousand more if I took the car to Carmack, which is literally a few minutes drive away, and showed him their written offer for a specific amount, he went to get his sales manager. He offered to take me to Carmack and pick me up, but said they wouldn't match the price at Carmack's. I was surprised they wouldn't keep a perfectly good used 6-year-old, top-of-the-line model with low mileage, which they had serviced. But once again, I was being more patient with them than they deserved. When it came to the price of the car, I had my eye on. I was even more disappointed. He quoted a price several $1,000s higher than what was listed on their website. When I showed him the printout again with the significantly lower price, the green salesman looked at the manager for guidance. He immediately said that the price listed on the website includes all available discounts and special offers, and you don't qualify for all of them. At this point, I started to get angry and showed them printouts from other dealerships in the area where the price was the same as the one on their website. I told them that if they weren't going to sell me the car for the price they listed on their website, I'd just go to their nearest competitor who had the same model for that price. The manager's answer was final. Go ahead, waste your time at the competitor's dealer. We won't even tell you anything when you come back here. I said, okay, thank you for your time. I'll go to the competitor's dealer, and I got up to leave. No one stopped me, and the girl at reception didn't say a word as I walked past her into the parking lot and drove to another dealer. By the time I arrived at the competitor's dealership, it was already around 8:00 p.m. I'd wasted too much time at the first dealership, and there was traffic. As soon as I walked in, the salesman approached me. I explained I just came from the first dealership and I want to buy a specific model. Both dealerships had the car in stock with the trim level I wanted, but they refused to sell it at the price listed on the website. If you agree, I'm ready to sign the contract right now. The salesperson immediately took me to his office, checked the car's availability, and confirmed, yes, the price on the website is current. We've started processing. When it came to the trade-in, I explained that the first dealership had tried to push me hard on the price. He said, if I show you a written offer from Carmack with the stated amount, they'll match it. I pulled out the paperwork, and without any argument, he approved the price, after which we proceeded to payment. I didn't get to that stage at the first dealership, but I already had credit approval through my credit union. The salesperson asked if I'd be willing to give their finance and insurance representative a chance to negotiate the rate. I agreed, and he came back with an offer 0.5% lower. Let's just say I was already very pleased with their work, but this was the one that finally convinced me I'd made the right decision to buy a car from them. Just as I finished signing the paperwork, the salesman from the first dealership texted me asking if I'd gotten the car at that price. I replied that I had and that I was finishing up the paperwork right now. He immediately tried calling, then texted me back saying he was willing to give me another $500. I texted him back saying the paperwork was already signed and he'd lost the deal. After the paperwork was done, the incredibly polite and helpful salesman from the new dealership spent another half hour with me after closing, showing me the car's features and explaining how the multimedia system worked. This exceeded all my expectations, as I thought I'd have to pore over the 300-page manual myself. That night, I drove home in my shiny new car, absolutely happy. The next day, I decided to add insult to injury with the first dealership and stopped by their place straight from work. For context, I work in the banking sector, and back then there was still a strict dress code. So I showed up at the salon in a suit with a briefcase, and the staff literally rushed to help me, including the receptionist, who only remembered me halfway through my request for the salesperson I'd spoken to the day before. She offered me a seat and asked, would I like a coffee while I go get it? I politely replied, no, thank you, I'll be quick. She added, somewhat quietly and awkwardly, that she'd bring the salesperson right over. A couple sat in the waiting area, looking disgruntled that no one had served them yet. But as soon as I walked in, a salesperson was found for me instantly. Less than a minute later, the salesperson and his manager emerged. The salesperson recognized me with a defeated expression, shook my hand, and asked how I was doing. Before I could respond, the manager started introducing himself as if we hadn't just talked an hour and a half earlier. When I reminded him that I'd been there yesterday and that he'd been the one telling me that going to the competitor was a waste of time because they wouldn't sell the car at the website price anyway, his demeanor instantly returned to the same insolent and arrogant manner he'd displayed the day before. He asked with a smirk, "So, did you sell it?" I didn't say anything, just turned toward the parking lot and pressed the key fob for my new car. The horn blared a few times. He abruptly gave up. "Well done," he said, and walked away, leaving the poor salesman alone. I shook the guy's hand, thanked him for his time, and headed for the exit. As I passed the receptionist, she cheerfully asked, "Do I need any more help?" I politely replied, "No, the other dealership gave me everything I needed, and I'm completely satisfied," and the icing on the cake was that as I passed that same couple in the waiting area, I noticed them exchange a glance as if thinking, maybe we should go to that dealer he mentioned. I said nothing more and left the building with a victorious smile. Story 3, Arrogant Home Depot Management Gets Chaos. Story 3, today I let the management do their job, and they screwed it up. I worked as a senior cashier at Home Depot, a high-volume home improvement chain. A couple of months ago, we redesigned the cash register area. Now the central checkout area is entirely composed of self-checkout machines, but we are required to assist customers as much as possible. If they have 6 or more items, expensive purchases, or anything that could be used to hide other things, we are required to check. Plus, of course, pushing store credit cards. It all started with the cashiers not pushing credit cards hard enough, and we fell behind schedule. And then last week, to make up for lost time, about midweek, my supervisor told us she wanted everyone physically working the checkout, including the senior cashiers. They don't even want us checking schedules to send people on breaks or home, even though overtime is prohibited. Unless we need to handle money, we're not allowed to leave the checkout. I think you can imagine how annoying this is. It's literally a self-service area. Customers were increasingly getting annoyed by us constantly trying to help. They were even more upset than before when the checkouts were converted to self-service. Back then, people were outraged that there were no proper checkouts in the main area. Only 2 or 3 regular checkouts were working at opposite ends of the store, and that's it. Neither I nor the other senior cashiers were going to blindly obey the supervisor's orders and stand behind the register 100% of the time, because at the very least we should know when to send people on breaks and when to let them go home, even if it means we'll be punished later. And today was Black Friday. My supervisor, the store manager, and several other managers were hovering around almost all the time. The other day, when the supervisor again insisted that senior cashiers should stand behind the register, I asked, how are we supposed to send people on breaks? Or how are we supposed to direct customers to empty checkouts? After all, most people won't go to an empty self-checkout unless they're shown it. She said, you can handle it if you have to turn your head 360 to scan purchases and monitor the line at the same time, so do it. Fine. I let them run the workflow themselves. They put me behind the register. I obeyed. I only got up when I was asked to cover for someone going home or when I needed to go to the restroom. My lunch was 2 hours late. I didn't say anything until an hour and a half after my scheduled break time because I almost never get my breaks on time. Lunch is mandatory due to the overtime ban, but my lunch wasn't the only time I was late. When I finally went to eat, one of the cashiers returned from the restroom and we both saw that his 15-minute break had been delayed by almost an hour. I apologized and explained that I wasn't allowed to check the schedule, otherwise I would have let him go long ago. I told him to go, but added that he'd better check with the supervisor, since that would mean 2 cashiers leaving at the same time. Then I returned from lunch and learned that one of our full-time cashiers had simply been forgotten at one of the few regular registers, and she was essentially accumulating over time. This would never have happened if I had been there, since she leaves at the same time every day. But I was 2 hours late for lunch. Later, I was sent to the gardening department to cover someone else's lunch, which was also more than half an hour late. When I returned inside, another cashier called. His 15-minute break was almost 45 minutes late, and that's only part of what happened. I wasn't allowed to perform my duties, and because of that, my cashier's breaks were simply forgotten, because they're not that important. Oh yeah, and we've got exactly the same number of credit card applications as we did at the beginning of last week before they made us sit behind the registers 24/7. It's not about standing behind the register, it's about just asking. It's something I don't like, but I do it anyway because it's my job. Well, at least it was. After I saw how my failure to do my job to comply with stupid rules that make no sense backfired on my cashiers. And on top of that, I got a job offer. I gave my resignation 2 weeks in advance, but I'm happy I'm leaving this hellish store. I'm just worried about my cashiers, who will most likely have to continue to suffer because of these new rules and regulations, especially if someone upstairs actually follows them 100%. Sorry for the super late update. Life has gotten a little busy. There's something I'd like to clarify. I was a senior cashier, meaning I was part of management, albeit a low-level one. What my bosses were doing on Black Friday was my job, but they should have been able to handle it without a problem. They just didn't care. Overall, nothing particularly interesting happened for the first 2 weeks after submitting my report. I just worked an extra week for my own convenience. The store manager didn't say a word to me for the rest of my tenure. He usually at least said hello. I thought the negativity ended there, but about a week and a half later, the supervisor made another suggestion that made no sense for our work. She suggested that we log into the self-checkout machines with our own usernames and use them like regular ones. The big problem is that if you do that, they won't accept cash. The system completely locks up. We already realized this when one cashier's account wasn't working one day. And, yeah, I told her it wouldn't work and explained why. I thought that would be the end of it, but it turned out not to be. In my very last week on the job, 2 other senior cashiers told me that our supervisor tried to twist practically every action I took. It was ironic, because she knew there was a high probability of my quitting since I lived quite far from the store, and the work itself was physically exhausting. And yes, I was mentally burned out, but if I noticed any carelessness, I always tried to improve. I hate it when work is done half-heartedly. Besides, I was always open with her. I was simply infuriated by her manner of working because I had been in her position before and I know that in reality, she is just lazy. And the only thing I could praise her for was her work with customers. But right before I left, she and another supervisor from her gang behaved extremely unprofessionally. I won't go into details, as I don't want to waste energy on it, but there was an incident. I made a small mistake. I personally apologized to the second supervisor, explained what happened, and she simply refused to talk to me. Very mature behavior. And everyone who learned about the situation decided that this was further confirmation that she, not my supervisor, should not be in a management position at all. It was pretty crazy, but honestly, I didn't really worry about it, since I literally had 1 shift left. A few weeks have passed since then. There were holidays, New Year's has arrived, and I'm doing fine. Overall, I feel calmer, less angry. After all, I'm a pretty calm person by nature. I hope all is well with you. And please be kind to the service workers. Comments. Unfortunately, they'll replace you, offering the guy assembling the cart a paltry raise in exchange for his soul. Most likely, it will be just another ordinary cashier who wasn't trained or pressured into accepting, or they'll hire someone off the street. As we have already seen, I was their only success in terms of hiring employees from outside. I used to work as a supervisor at another shitty corporation, and until recently I just didn't know it was possible to do a bad job. I quit to prove to management that they were wrong and that their methods were hurting others. I'm not the only one they're going to lose, but I'm the biggest loss because they treated me like a supervisor when my boss wasn't there. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for listening to all these stories. Also, watch our previous videos, which you can see here, and be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Good luck!